Okay student, in this video we shall see about a new topic, and this topic is about internal resistance of a cell. So we all know that when the resistance of a conductor it is connected to a cell like this, then the current is flowing through the resistance, from the positive terminal of the cell and to the negative terminal of the cell. All right, now in order to make a continuous motion, a continuous motions of current, then the current inside the cell, it should be passing from the negative terminal to the positive terminal of the cell. All right, so this current that is passing inside the cell, from negative to positive, it will experience some resistance, just like it experienced a resistance by the resistor R. So similarly, inside a cell, when the current is passing through it, then it experiences a resistance which we know as the internal resistance of a cell. So this positive and negative here, it means they are the plates of the electrodes. Okay, because a cell is actually consists of an electrolytes, okay, like H2SO4. I hope you know very well about this from chemistry. So now this H2SO4, or like sodium chloride, or like copper sulfate, okay, these are the electrolytic solution. So what happened here is that these electrolytic solutions, they dissociate into two ions when the current is passing through it. Like this H2SO4, it will split into H plus and SO4 minus inside the cell. Okay, so this plate here is known as the positive plate, or in other words, this electrode, okay, we call electrodes. These two plates are called electrodes. So this electrode is anode, and the other electrode is cathode, okay, which is a negative plate. Okay, so as the current is passing inside the cells from negative to positive, or from cathode to anode, then this solution of the cell, right, will show some resistance to the flow of current. So that resistance, right, as I have mentioned earlier, it is known as the internal resistance of the cell. Okay, so please, you have to note down here that outside the cell, when the current is passing through the resistor R, then the charge carrier outside the cell, it is due to electrons. Okay, so the electrons is responsible for the for the current outside the cell. But inside the cell, right, because the current has to pass from negative plate to the positive plate, then inside the cell, who is responsible for the electric current? So inside the cells, we don't have free electrons, but we have ions here, like positive and negative ions. So it is these ions here that is responsible for the electric current inside the cell. So please remember this point. Outside the cell, the charge carrier is the electron, and inside the cell, the charge carrier is due to the positive and negative ions. Right, so this internal resistance of a cell is now defined as the resistance which is actually offered by the electrolyte of the cell. All right, okay, now apart from this, now let us see what are the factors that is actually the internal resistance of a cells depend. Okay, the first factor is this internal resistance of a cell is directly proportional to the distance between the two electrodes, that is small d. So if this distance between the positive and the negative plate is increased, then the resistance also increase. And if the distance between them is decreased, the internal resistance also decrease. The second factor is the internal resistance of a cell is inversely proportional to the area of the plates of the electrodes. which means when this area of the electrodes it is large, then the internal resistance will be small, and if the area of the plate is small, the internal resistance will be large. Third point is that this internal resistance of a cell, it is also inversely proportional to the temperature of the electrolytes, which means when the temperature of the electrolytes is increasing, the internal resistance will decrease, and when the temperature of the electrolyte is decreasing, the internal resistance will increase. Okay. Fourth point is this internal resistance of a cell, okay, it is also directly proportional to the concentrations of the electrolyte. When I say concentrations of electrolytes, it's mean that like if you have, for example, like H2SO4. Now the concentrations of electrolytes mean if you have more positive and negative ions, then the internal resistance of a cells will increase. But if you have less ions, then the internal resistance of a cells will decrease. So how do we make less number of positive and negative ion in this case? So we make less ions in this case by adding, for example, if you add water into this H2SO4. If you add water into H2SO4, then what happens? The number of the, the concentrations of the hydrogen ion in the solutions will decrease. So when the concentrations of the hydrogen ion is decreased in this case, then the internal resistance also will decrease. Alright? Okay. And the fifth factors that determines the internal resistance of a cell is the nature of the electrolyte. Nature of electrolytes. Okay. As I told you, we have many types of electrolytes which dissociate into positive and negative ion under the passings of electric current. Now, depending upon what types of electrolytes are you using here, then accordingly you will have the internal resistance. Okay, so the internal resistance of H2SO4 is different from the internal resistance of NaCl, and it is different from the internal resistance of CuSO4, and so on. So hence the internal resistance of a cell, it depends upon the nature of the electrolytes. Okay, I hope this is clear to you.